Music Milestones of YYZ, Scott Turner, Ivor Hamilton, and this is episode 10. And just off the top, we want to mention we have actually two episodes this week. There is a special edition episode, which is number 9. Which
we're doing a twofer this week, buddy.
Yeah. So what we decided to do, because of the CFNY, the Spirit of Radio documentary, we thought we would gather the 5 executive producers, put them together, and we're just talking about the doc. So we talked the doc. It's a separate episode, number 9, and it's a great way you can get to meet the other executive producers. It wasn't just Alan Cross, Ivor Hamilton, and Scott Turner. There was others we worked with, and you get a chance to meet them, hear about who they are, and we talk all about it. We talk about the making of and the various challenges of trying to tell a story that is 8 to 10 years long in under a couple of hours. Is like, oh boy, what? That's one of the things, Ivor, again, I've never been involved in doing such a thing, and just, the appreciation for people that do this kind of work, and like, how do you, you got to cut so much out, and it's
a lot of discipline,
heartbreaking.
Right? So sometimes it's like, you can't, as a DJ, you would know this, right? You can't please everybody, because there's always somebody who, wants that song played, and you're like, I can't do it or whatever. You never fit it in there.
Oh yeah.
They're disappointed.
Oh, yes.
That happens. With a book, you can go further. A little teaser on it. We talked about the CFNY puppet show, so that was kind of fun.
Find out what that's all about. Yeah, and it's the other thing too is it's like these things cost money, so that's probably the biggest challenge is you need people to put up the money, and then you could do like 6 different movies if you had the money, but it's a challenge, right?
Yeah, and again, you don't want it to go too long. I mean, I there's been 1 or 2 in the business with the absolute best of intentions but a 3.5 hour documentary on I'm not even going to bring it up, the title of it, but it was like, man, oh man, I know you loved your topic, but that was way too much for me, right?
Yeah. And let me say this, when people talk about, they want more, they want a longer version. Now, there are like super, super core, hardcore fans, and this could be for any artist and any story that, for certain subjects, I would sit through, 2, 3, 4 hours a series in that. But there's a lot of people, it's just like, it's an interesting story, but it's not like they're hanging on everything. So when you go past an hour and a half, you're putting people to sleep. And we had a challenge of trying to reach, a broader audience, but also pleasing, the core. And then we also talked about, an international audience. And that's a whole other challenge of how you're going to tell the story and how long it's going to be. But, here's the thing. If it was, an hour and a half, 2 hours long, guaranteed there'll be people going, hey, I love your doc, but, man, it was a little long, guys. Way too long.
Well, there's that. And of course, to be like, hey, you still forgot about whatever.
Yes.
I need to know. And so,
Yes.
Surely there's more that you guys could talk about. Yeah. Like, or you could have covered it. There's, again, as I said, you're never going to be, you're never going to please everybody. And my days of working, I used to work with the Grey Cup. I used to be the sports guy when I was at Universal Music. And I remember, and I worked with them every year on the halftime show. And so, every year we would try and, bring our best foot forward. And sure enough, the second we announced what the halftime show was at the Grey Cup, there was always an avalanche of negativity of people coming at us. And mostly they were from hardcore Canadian fans. And when the CFL, it was in 2005, they decided that they were going to take a step into the world of international. They had never had an international act at the Grey Cup before. And that 2005, it was the Black Eyed Peas. People lost their minds, not in a good way. Like, what the fuck, people? Now, and that continued, we had a lot of like international acts that were, Imagine Dragons were on there, Fall Out Boy. And then finally, we tired of getting people like, complaining because they wanted to have, Kim Mitchell there every year and David Wilcox and Bachman Turner Overdrive, those sort of things that you would get. But I remember they had a publicity. He goes, Ivor, we could have Jesus appear and there'd still be complaints. And that wasn't to me like, I mean, right. Yes. You can't win, right? Like there's always going to be somebody who wants more, wants to know more, and wants something that you can't necessarily deliver.
Yeah. So again, just go, it's out now. It's episode 9. We talk the doc, and we are going to talk more about the doc in coming weeks on this podcast, because we're going to bring some people on that, some of the staff there and some other people, some listeners we're actually going to bring on the show to talk about, their memories about the station and stories, because there's so many other stories. And we knew that we couldn't get everything into the doc. So that's part of where this podcast came from. We talked about, we need a podcast because we got so many stories we can't fit in, and we'll talk about it. So we'll give people that opportunity to tell those stories. And just the amount of social media reaction from the doc, and Ivor and I are going to spend a little time today. We're going to read some of your comments and your questions, and just everybody's got a story. And so we're touch on that today. So that's coming up on the show. I think you'll like that. So, just for those that are on YouTube, I just thought we would represent it. Sorry, I'm representing a bit of Paris, Ontario, where I live today. If you're watching on YouTube, this is the bike shop, my bike shop I go to. So hi to Bernie and the gang at Lost Bandit Bike Company in Paris, Ontario. Much respect. And Ivor, Zappa,
Frank
Zappa and Mothers.
Roxy and Elsewhere records from 1974. And one of the most memorable times in my early days at CFNY was when Frank Zappa came to the radio station. He, the night before, had visited Chum FM. He walked into the control room to do his interview with Chum.
Little Yellow House visit?
Yeah, he came to the Little Yellow House. But what I was going to say was he came to the Little Yellow House after visited Chum FM. Chum was presenting the show at Maple Leaf Gardens. I think it was Maple Leaf Gardens or the CNE. I can't remember off the top of my head. It might have been the CNE. Anyway, he saw that there was tape all on the record, that the programmer, the music director at Chum had covered up half of his albums. I think there might have been 2 songs that they were allowed to play, but they put tape right over the songs. Frank Zappa flipped out, cut the interview, and left. Came up to CFNY, brought his coffee maker with him because he was a big coffee guy. He drank like 20 cups of coffee a day, and he was also a militant smoker too. So, back in those days, you could smoke anywhere. Yeah. But he comes up with his smokes and his coffee machine and goes on the air, and loved the fact that we were going to play all his records, no matter what, right? And if you were, especially the early days, we played Cruise Slut, we played Bobby Brown. I mean, we played these records that would never be able to get away with, or songs you'd never be able to get away with today. And there was never an issue. He loved that so much. He canceled the rest of his interviews, stayed the entire night. There started to be a party in the parking lot at 340 Main Street. The cops came, but they were just coming because people were out there, wanted to meet Frank Zappa. They were, having a few beers, probably smoking a couple of joints. The very next night, and when he left the radio station, the then music director and program director at the time was Bruce Hading, and he gave Frank a big stack of CFNY T-shirts to take with him. So at the concert the next night, presented by our competition, Chum FM, the entire road crew were all wearing CFNY shirts on stage.
Fantastic. So. Fantastic. Great story. That's awesome. So what's the disc of the week? I'm sure you purchased something, Ira. Do you want to share that with everybody?
This isn't a purchase item, but let me
you didn't. You got it. You got it for free.
Are sort of watching on YouTube. Do you remember the long box 4 CDs way back when?
Yeah, those are better than those other plastic cases.
I mean, this is a cardboard one. I mean, this was more of a security thing. It was here in Canada for a while, but it was more so a U.S. thing. And I dug this out of my box of CFNY memorabilia that I have, and stuff that didn't make it in the movie. But I brought it out. I never opened it up. It was a sampler that was done in the winter of 1987 by Sire Records. And it was called Just Say Yes. They did a few of these things. They were commercial samplers. You had to buy it. But I bring it up because great bands on this one. You get Depeche Mode, Echo and the Bunnymen, Mighty Lemon Drops, James, The Smiths, Wild Swan, Ice-T, Ramones, Throwing Muses, Aztec Camera, a couple of other ones, Casual Gods, which was, the REM spinoff. The executive producer on this is the late, great Howie Klein, who is in our documentary, one of CFNY's all-time greatest U.S. supporters, but didn't matter to him. We were great proponents of supporting the music that they had at Sire, and prior to that on 415 Records. So that's why I thought I would show this today. Shout out to the late, great Howie Klein.
Yeah, and we do talk about him on episode number 8. And it's funny, when you first put that up, for some reason, Jive Bunny came into my head.
God
like, gee, did I ever buy the
right
box
up there
set,
with
the Jive Bunny box set?
Right up there with Tarzan Boy with one of the, well, first of all, Tarzan Boy, I would say if you were looking at the worst songs that CFNY made the mistake of ever playing there, I would say that Tarzan Boy was probably the number one worst song that we ever played, in my opinion. But the Jive Bunny thing, fortunately, we never played that. That was after the fact. No. That sucked a bit. No.
Yeah,
so
fair enough. Okay. We're off the top this week. We're going to talk about some birthdays, just some big birthdays. A couple of people turning 70. Wanted to mention that Paul Young on the 17th. Actually, the week we're looking at, what is the week we're looking at? I'm so mixed up in time. I think it's roughly.
What are we? Well, next week aren't we the week of the 10th or the week of the 10th of January, right? We start
something like that, 10th or 11th, that week. So anyway, so on the 17th, Paul Young turned 70. And when Paul Young, we always talk about this at CFNY. He was a member of the band that did that song Toast. What was it?
Toast, street band. He was in the street band before going solo, and then obviously he was a pretty good solo artist. I mean, we like Paul Young. I mean, it was like. Pretty middle of the road stuff, but
great singer though.
He had some good songs.
Yes, great singer. Just my little Paul Young story is just for me. Every time I think of Paul Young was the time and David Marsden was very, very good at the radio station and giving perks to other people. He'd get calls from record companies and various presents and things like that. And he said to me, Scott, how would you like to MC Paul Young at Maple Leaf Gardens? And I'm like, oh my God, I've never emceed a show ever in my life at Maple Leaf Gardens. And I was just beside myself to get up on stage. This is Maple Leaf Gardens, Toronto Maple Leafs, all these great concerts over the years. And I got to go out. And often when you're an MC, it's pretty rare now it's like nobody gets to do it, but back then, radio stations had a lot of cachet and power, and, having a MC from a radio station was a big deal, but often you'd go out maybe 10 minutes before the band. So you couldn't go on just before and introduce them. It still happened, but not as often. So I think I went out 10 minutes before to just, hey, warm up the crowd sort of thing and say hi. And just turn on that microphone and that, sound system, just cannonading through the rafters that is
Gardens. Now, Paul, here's a question for you. And do you remember how much you got paid to do your MC work?
Kind of, sort of. I think, and David, again, another credit to David Morrison, he was really adamant of making sure that we got paid when we did things, little MC things, or just we had to go by and get on stage somewhere. But I believe it was $75, possibly $100. And this is 19.
It was 75.
80 something.
It was 75.
Okay, yeah.
When we first started, it was 25. It was only $25, and then it went up.
Yeah. But at least you got paid. We're in a lot of situations like that. It's like that's part of your job as a on-air host. It was like here's part of your gigs. You go to this, go to that.
Well, I mean, this is the budgetary thing. You could pull something from Peter to pay Paul. That he pull it out of the promotion budget to pay Scott or pay the announcers and not worry about taking on the bottom line on your salary on those things. I did a couple of ones that were just huge as well. I did like New Order at the CNE and The Cure at CNE, and I'm like, man, 30,000 people, and you're just like, oh my God, like that's
pretty cool.
It really is something else when you do it. But, to your point, you're like, 10 minutes before whatever, obviously the coolest thing is like, when the band's, as the band's coming on stage. But, I think I got to do a number of the ones when we did the, some of the club ones when we would do the live recordings and things like that. Right. I think my voice is on a couple of those things. So anyway.
Yeah. $75, in the 80s. That was good money, man. That was good money.
And I don't think we got taxed at the time, so that was good too. I think we got actually the $75 because if it was, $75 and you got taxed, it would be 35 or something.
Pretty much. Guess who else is turning 70 on the 18th? Tom Bailey of the Thompson Twins is up there. These artists that we grew up with, they're growing older, Ivor.
Yes, they are.
Suggs of Madness on the 13th. He turns 65. Do you have a Suggs story at all? And his real name is Graham McPherson.
Saying that I'm going over to England in a couple of weeks, and in Camden, the pub that basically where Madness was born is still there. I think it's called the Elephant. It's the Elephant and something. Right off the top of my head, I can't remember the exact name of the pub, but it is pictured in some of their album artwork or whatever, that all of them in the pub that they started. And you go in and there's a ton of Madness memorabilia up all over the walls there. But it's still quite famous. And adjacent to that pub in Camden is a venue that specializes in alternative cover bands, and they get original bands in there as well. When I was in there 2 years ago, because I was over there to see the Bills play NFL, and but we went and saw the Undertones with Tom Robinson band too, not at that venue, but that night that we went in, there was a Stranglers cover band, and I was like, man, oh man, never heard of a Stranglers cover band anywhere, but it was well attended and people do it. But it's a great atmosphere. So if you're in Camden, if you can find that Madness pub, it's definitely worth stopping in and having a pint in.
Yeah, we'll post maybe the exact name of that, because I'm thinking anything with an elephant on it. There's probably like 4,000 pubs in the UK called Elephant and something.
Indian restaurants and what have you. So yes, I will dig up the original name. Maybe I can even get it before the end of the. So.
And send me a cover of also that Sire compilation that you just you showed us. We'll post that on our socials too. And just another milestone birthday is Shabba Ranks turning 60 on January 17th, which I think is suspect, because one thing I've learned about Jamaican culture is that, especially when I'm trying to find record release dates and album release dates, if it's a lot of the Jamaicans, and no disrespect, because I got some Jamaican friends and I love Jamaica and I've been there many times, and the Jamaican community in Toronto is so key to part of the culture of Toronto. Yes. Anyway, they're not the best at keeping records.
Oh my God.
To be honest. Right? So they are not the best at being organized in that way. So Shabba could be 80. I don't know. But anyway, according to what I have, he's 60.
I don't know if you spent time down in Jamaica, but like everything is so easy.
Oh, many times.
Like it was just like, you're driving along the road and you want to have a red stripe or whatever, and you pull into this little place and there'd be a sign up that's not their license to sell liquor. It was like thinking of getting a license sign. It was like, and that was acceptable, right? Later on, we're thinking about getting a license, but we'll still serve you the beer. So,
and you order the beer and then wait. Be patient. Wait 15 minutes and you'll get that beer.
Come soon or whatever. So, I will say one time I was down there, I was on this wedding, and it was at one of the Sandals or whatever. And there was only me and one other person who wanted to go off the resort. And I was going, I said, I don't give a shit. I'm going, because Yellow Man was playing down the road. Cool. And before the gig, I saw him coming down the road. He was just walking down the road, and I said, "Hey, Yellow Man." It's like, "Hey, man." He goes, "We used to play your records on CFNY in Toronto all the time. I loved you, man. Like, you were the best, right?" The guy brought me up on stage during his set, and I was like, "This is the greatest thing." He's like, "Oh man, from Toronto, play my records," and I was like, "Thank you so much."
That's awesome. That's a great one. I love it. We'll have to tell some more Jamaican stories another day. Okay, we're gonna move on and go back into the 80s here. Well, if you listen to episode number 8, you kind of know where we're going with this one, because on that episode we talked about David Marsden doing the last regular show that he did outside of, he's on nythespirit.com, but we're talking the FM radio days. He decided to hang up the headphones from doing his Saturday night show on CFNY. He was doing that for many, many years. And he had found somebody that he thought, this guy is the guy to replace me. And I think he knew David is just, he's got some extra sense about him, knowing that this person's the right person. And that was Chris Sheppard. So Chris Sheppard was going to take over for David Marsden, which, by the way, is covered in the, if you haven't seen the doc yet, CFNY, The Spirit of Radio, it's covered there, as Shep is covered too. And I have mentioned this. I have a clip here. I did talk to Earl Jive, because we've talked about on this podcast before about how Earl Jive was also part of discovering Shep and worked with Shep. And this is just a little story about that from the live Earl Jive. This is when I talked to him.
Is this a recent conversation?
Yes, just the other day. Sorry, I'm going to try to get that to end so I can play you the right clip here. Yeah, so Earl Jive and Beverly Hills are in California. They go all over the world doing a lot of house sitting and fun stuff like that, which is a whole other story. But anyway, this is Earl Jive talking about how he met Shep.
I went with Claude Barnes, who later became a city cameraman, to the Iguana Lounge. I had never been. And we got inside. I told him I wanted to look around. And I went over to the DJ booth, and there was this kid there. And he knew who I was, and he invited me in. And it was Shep. And after we talked for about 10 minutes, he asked me if I wanted to MC a gig over at the Copa, a new club that used to be a flower store, a big nursery. And I said, sure. So I think he paid me $100 or something like that to MC that gig. And I thought the place was great. So I got, I think Andy Zemus, or I think it was Andy Zemus, to set up a meeting at the Copa with Martin Arts and Murray Ball. And we got them to hire us to do Sunday nights, the worst night of the week. I said, give us the worst night of the week. So they gave us Sunday nights, and I asked them if we could have the buffet that they had the night that I was there and emceed with Shep. And they agreed to that. So we started doing Sunday nights. And so I hired Shep then to play the records for us. And within a few weeks, I hired him to play records for us at every place that we played. And so we did the Copa. We did the Aqueduct in Welland. And we did Ladies' Night at the club at Richards. Beverly and Shep did that one. And I'm trying to think, there may have been another one. I'll text you if I remember another night that we did. But after a few months, at one point, the Sunday nights got going well enough, they wanted to have us then go try to do Tuesday nights, I believe. And this may have been at that point. So this is about 6 months in. And I had to go away. And Bev and I, maybe we went to Florida or something like that. And I hired James Scott to do one of my gigs, and I hired Jim Reed to do another, and I hired David Marsden to MC the night at the Copa. And that's how David happened to go to the Copa that night. And the following Monday, he asked if I would mind if he hired Chris Shepard to do Saturday nights, because having met Chris Shepard and see what he did at the Copa made him want to give him a gig on CFNY.
There you go. Pretty cool.
Interesting.
And just, yes. And just a side note to that, I think the other club he was talking about was RPM, of course. That
Yeah, probably.
RPM live to air on Fridays was just enormous, and
It was
of
a
course,
club at Richards. Was that out? That was out in Mississauga, I believe, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes, definitely. One of the things I want to mention here is that for all of us that remember Chris, there is a lot of live to airs when you go back, and especially when we had Chris on at Energy 108, and he was always live from a club. And of course, a lot of people remember him live from clubs, and that was exciting and everything. But if you remember back, like those shows when he was doing Saturday nights from the studio were personally for me my favorite Chris Sheppard, because it was a different environment. He wasn't distracted by having to deal with a crowd out there on the dance floor,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. But he would take calls, and it was just another kind of environment. And there was nothing that quite like Chris Sheppard on a Saturday night on CFNY. I don't know if the Club 102 thing was the name of the show right out of the gate or not, but they
I don't
eventually became
remember whether
Club
it was
102.
or not. I mean, I know that he was
Yeah.
scared shitless at the start of it. Like he was like, "Whoa, this is such a," as he
Yes.
said in the doc, he was never on the radio before. He doesn't know what to do. And David said, "Well, just be you or whatever," right? So, and for anybody getting used to the equipment, screwing things up on the air. I mean, you and I used to screw up all the time when we were on the air, right? Like just the tape deck stop, or the cart machine wouldn't work, or reel to reel, whatever. I remember you're talking and I'm doing an edit with a razor blade to make sure that we can get on. Get on right. So
yeah. So this is the 18th of January, 1986. Let's remind everybody. So Chris is in the studio on Saturdays. Now, he may have had a helper or something, but let's remind everybody, we were still, even though that CDs were out, they were still very new. So I would say what the library and what we were playing on the air in January 1986, would you say it was still about 70% records?
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
it
was like 19
or more?
Maybe I would say it depended, right? Like, because we also were, I mean, I ended up taking an approach similar to what we did with Plain Imports, was to go out and buy a ton of CDs, because there was not manufacturing in Canada at that point, or not much. Most of it was like polygrams, for example, were all imported from Germany. And I think maybe CBS or that became Sony were the first, I think, to start making their own CDs, but it wasn't it wasn't mass market. It was still expensive. You'd have to go to, like, in a lot of instances, I used to buy stuff from Fairview Electronics. They was importing CDs. Even like the Record Peddler, they got into CDs, but that was a little bit later. They started bringing them in. But it was they were very expensive at the time, and so it was a whole process. But I treated it like the import. So when I could get us some great CDs, we would put them in. But to your point, I think Shep was probably 80 to 90% on vinyl at that point. That's what I'm going to say.
Yes. So he's dealing with that. You've got to play records. It's not just pressing buttons. It's getting the records ready and doing a show like that.
And let's also remember too that, if you're on the technical side, the turntables at CFNY were not like the DJ turntables. You didn't have the flexibility on the vary speed and the things that you could do, the back and forth, the mixing or whatever that you could do with for the example of the SL 1200, but that the CFNY direct drive turntables did not work that way. So I'm sure all of that was a bit of an adjustment for him to do. But I do recall one of the guys who was a helper, that he would bring in SL 1200s, disconnect the turntables in the control room, and then put them back in later on. He may have had that sort of help.
Yeah, Bobo comes to mind as one of those helpers. That was more in the clubs. We called him Bobo, who was always there helping with the lights and various different things. And Chris did have various helpers over the years and stuff like that. But
he always surrounded himself with people that helped.
Yes.
So.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Just a side note, thanks to Earl Jive for that. And also we're going to have, I did talk to Earl about being on this podcast in the coming weeks. So that'd be great to have him on. Also that, again, which we talk about on the episode 9 that's out when we talk with the executive producers of the documentary. You know, Earl and Beverly, although you see a couple of images of them in this 60-second TVO documentary. Unfortunately, yeah, he was interviewed. Bev were interviewed, I think, down in California, were they not?
Yes.
Yeah. And so, and there are other examples of interviews that were done, you know, in the UK and in different cities that, you know, ended up on the cutting room floor for various different reasons. And it's just one of those unfortunate things in making films, making documentaries, just like making an album. There's songs that don't make it and whatever, blah, blah, blah. It's just unfortunate. But anyway, anything else you want to say about Chris before we move on?
No, I don't. I think we're good. I mean, Chris and I were pals and had a great deal of respect for him. And so hope we hear from him one day, but who knows?
Yes, that's a whole other story. Yeah, we joked about it. It's true about, we joked about doing a separate documentary called Finding Chris Sheppard.
Where's Shep? Yeah, find Shep.
Where's Shep? So we might do that.
That would be that would be the puppet one,
yeah.
Right?
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah. Listen to episode number 9. We had a good laugh about that. Some tracks that came out in the 80s, January 13th, 1986. So 40 years ago, Life's What You Make It. There was a couple of territories, a couple of countries that did have that release out in November, but most of them, including North America, Talk's Life What You Make It came out in January 1986. One of those classic Talk tracks. One of the great bands that I don't know anybody that didn't like Talk. Right across the board, that was just one of those bands. Was just like you played that any of their records, people just the phones lit up.
Well, when a couple of years later, when they kind of took a different direction, I know a lot of people didn't particularly like what their ambient experimental direction was.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, I'm talking about the good ones. Yeah,
you're talking about the dance floor ones, you know. But
yeah,
don't get me wrong; those experimental records were really cool. But I could understand the people that like the dance stuff that it didn't sound like Depeche Mode anymore. So anyway, they moved on.
Here's a track from 40 years ago. Just let's see if you can remember this one.
I do know who it is.
There's Bono's voice there. That was a track that Clannad, Irish band, and Bono did together in a lifetime.
Yeah, I mean,
it came out in January '86.
Yep. The wonderful thing about there's such camaraderie in Ireland for everybody knows everybody else, and at some point everybody gets a chance to play together, do songs together. There was a couple of big fundraising concerts in Ireland where you get everybody from U2 to Van Morrison to Waterboys to Phil Lynott at the time before he passed or whatever, all playing together, and of course all the up and coming bands at the time, the Hot House Flowers and Into a New and what have you. So so that was to me it was
Clannad.
Clannad were they were of the moment.
Like some of their records.
I liked them at the time. Today I can't say I would listen to them much anymore, but they were very good at what they did back then. So,
yeah, and it's another example of some of the different sounds that the station played back in those days. It wasn't all new wave, man. There was some other stuff too. Also, 40 years ago for Different Light, the Bangles album, that was the North American release of that. That was a cool record we played. And
I mean,
unless you have any,
I would say they were Bangles were a good road show thing. You could walk like an Egyptian, fun video. People liked it. So there was a lot of the guys at the radio station were all fans of Susanna Hoffs too, and it's because she was a good looking lady or whatever at the time. But you know what? They were,
yeah.
They started out as kind of like a punk band in California, like a psychedelic punk band. And they had some really cool indie stuff before this Different Light record came out. That still sounds great today. So yeah, they were, the Bangles were, they got pretty massive pretty quick or whatever once this record came out. But hey, they were part of what we played. So
okay, we're going to go back 45 years this month. So it was January 1981, and this is, I don't know if the name of what the album was, but this was the song from this album that everybody loved to hear on CFNY.
Yeah, this is a big gift.
I've got a rubber in my wallet, one of those little, what you would call it. I'm saving it for that special day when the right girl comes my way. It leaves a circular impression from all those years of compression. I've had it since I turned 13. I got it in a vending machine. Circular impression, leading to a state of depression. In my wallet, I can't wait to install it. No,
I can't wait. Anyway, it goes on. Everybody knows that Circular Impression by was it Toronto band? The Extras.
Toronto band. They were a Toronto band. Yes, I will say that listening to it now, it feels like Bad Manners or Madness could have recorded that, and nobody would have ever thought of anybody else's song. Right? It sounds so similar to that sound. Right?
Yeah, I could hear Bad Manners doing that.
Bad Manners would do that in a second, because Bad Manners did a whole bunch of covers. They did Can and. Nah, whatever. So, yeah, I could totally hear that. I would do that. The Bad Manners could have probably made that a hit if they did it. So,
I know. Thinking about that, maybe you should have handed them the Extras record, and they could have worked that into their live show.
If they're on the road, they're together. They're still together, and if I see them and they're in England, I'll hand them, get them the music or whatever. So, hey, Scott, I did want to mention go off topic for a second. Is in addition to this documentary coming out this past week, just for fun, and I was sitting on it for a long time, and we posted it on our Music Milestones YYZ Facebook page, is that we released a 1,500 plus song playlist of basically everything that we could think of that got played on the radio station during the Spirit of Radio era. And, that I'd been working on it for a number of months, and you gave me some input on a bunch of things, or I would put some songs in there. I'm like, Turner's going to ask me about these other ones that I didn't think about. So I better put those in there too. But I will say, the amount of people who've checked it out and saved the playlist is and the feedback that we've gotten on it is phenomenal. Of course, I get one guy says only 1,500, and David used to say at one point, he goes, "Well, we got 10,000 songs in the library." So, well, we might have, but we didn't play 10,000 songs, right? Like there might have been all the albums in there, but for the stuff that kind of got the regular airplay on CFNY, it was probably a couple of thousand, so. There's always going to be things that are missed out, but I did my best to go. It's kind of like go through. Here's all the key acts. Here's some of the novelty acts. Here's the ones that were maybe some one-hit wonder ones, the imports and things. And I did find that a lot of the things that were imports or the hard to find, like on those hardest hits rarity ones that were rarities for so long, and then those guys made those records available again. Well, guess what? They're not available again, a lot of them. So. There are songs that are missing, but anyway, it's if you kind of want that Spirit of Radio experience, there's 1,600 songs on that playlist that you can check out and have some fun with.
Now, some people have asked about the iTunes. Can you get that on the Apple Music or whatever?
Yeah, we're gonna try,
and then
try and move it over to there is a way to do it. It's a little bit complicated, but I did respond to a couple of the people who asked is, can we move that over to iTunes? I know we can. I don't know whether the process is not as easy, because I know I'm Scott. I'm preempting what you're going to ask me about putting on YouTube Music. But we'll try.
That would be my request too. Yes.
Well, that would be your request. I think you would have to do it, Scott, manually, as opposed to you're able to move just the tracks over. So if I can do it on YouTube Music, I will. But if it means manual, then that could take a lot longer. Anyway.
And if anybody has any tips, and don't forget to try AI, Ivor. Sometimes AI has the magic. If anybody knows a trick to do that, do let us know.
As I said, we're just going to go for Apple, for iTunes, not so much for YouTube. And as you know, they're competitive services, so some people don't make it easy for you.
That is true. Okay, just back to the 80s for one more time, and I was talking to Ivor about this. I was digging back in January 1986. That's what we're talking about right now. And I came across this article, and it was in the Globe and Mail, and the headline was "Lost Milk Crates, Headache for Dairy Industry." And it just spun a whole bunch of thoughts and memories about the milk crates that we all had, and some still have. Let me just read a couple of excerpts from this article. It was basically, here's a quote from Tom Kane, the general manager of the Ontario Dairy Council, saying, "We find them everywhere. It drives us mad." The article says dairies use the crates when they deliver milk to supermarkets and corner stores. The drivers are supposed to pick all of the empty crates up, but between 1/3 and 1/2 disappear every year, destined for bookshelves and record collections. And they say in the article it costs them millions of dollars every year. So, it's funny. I was thinking about that as like, well, maybe you really force the guys to make sure they pick them up. And I swear to you, Ivor, and I do thank my, God bless both of my parents who are no longer with us. They were I guess the good stuff you took from parents growing up is I never stole anything. But I think I might have stolen a few record crates. And I don't know why that was. Maybe because everybody had them, or they were just lying there and they looked so good.
Just
and
there.
boy,
like
they were just there.
You go around to like a back of a Max Milk or a Becker's or whatever. There were hundreds of them sitting out the back there.
Yeah, and it looked like they were throwing them out.
Yeah, well, right? Even if they were, I knew that they were, they needed to be picked up or whatever. But there were so many of them there. So what's to stop you? I mean, first of all, like a guy like me, I had a huge record collection back then. And what was the best and cheapest way to store your records but to put them in milk crates? And, everybody was poor, back then when you get your first or second apartment or whatever, and you're building, you don't have enough money for furniture. Well, what's perfect to build furniture? You get some bricks and some milk crates and a couple of planks of wood, and bang, there you've got your bookshelf, and there you've got some, a makeshift coffee table or whatever. So milk crates were
bookshelves. Yeah.
Very useful for that. And I know in that article there was an example of there was somebody who'd stolen hundreds of them for a nursery, and this was in the States. They were the same size in the States, and the cops came and they went into the nursery and they upended all the milk crates and dumped all the plants out and took all the crates away from that person. So they were a lot tougher on it in the States. They were taking people to court, and this Globe and Mail article said, we're not going to take people to court for taking milk, whatever. And one guy got into the game early. It said in that article, and said, "Oh yeah, I've made my own now, and I'm selling them for $4." And I think if you want them today, they're probably about $25 or $30 to buy today. So, but everybody,
I definitely had.
You can get them at Home Depot now, Canadian Tire, whatever. So,
yeah. Well, and of course, the article talks about it, and there was at one point the dairy industry clued into this and seeing them everywhere, and they decided to. And this was remember the first milk crate you picked up, and you take them home and put your records in them, and it was like, holy shit, it doesn't fit. What happened?
Right after a while,
yeah, right. The dairy industry got smart.
Instead of having your 60 records or 50 or 60, all of a sudden, you would still fit on an angle, but you could only put
on an angle
20 records or something like that in it. The ironic
they made
thing
them
about-
smaller.
The ironic thing about all of that, Scott, is I used to have all of the albums for the Video Roadshow in milk crates, and we probably would take out, I don't know, 12 milk crates to any given show. We took a massive library out there. I remember Earl Jive, he came to one of the shows. You got too much music. And it's like, well, I'll do what I want, Earl. So, whatever, because you needed to have the variety.
You just wanted to make sure that was there. Yeah.
Well, it was
that
just
is a sign of a true great DJ.
Well, yeah. And
Too many records.
We would go to high schools in certain areas sometime where there would be, super cool alternative guy that booked the road show, and the rest of the school were into Van Halen or they were like all into house music. So we were like, well, we should bring some of these other things along with us. And that was, part of the reason why we, took so much. But I was going to say, the most ironic thing about it was we had all these milk crates in there, and our first big sponsor of the road show was the Milk Marketing Board. So
that's right.
So we were handing out these thousands of milk buttons every night or whatever. And I guess we were thinking we could have just put them in milk crates to hand out, but we didn't. Nobody ever said anything. So.
Yeah, no, they were pretty good about it, and I think it's funny they did shrink them, but they still wanted the old ones back, and because that article was 1986, and they had mentioned it was 3-4 years earlier they had started, producing the crates smaller, but those prized crates that fit the 12-inch in albums was like who didn't have one in their collection?
For sure, everybody did.
Maybe people can share some of their photos on our socials. Okay, let's move. We're going to move just back into the 70s for a second because there's a couple things we want to mention here.
Go back to 70s.
Okay, dipping just for a second into the 70s, one thing I wanted to mention here was, I know we talk a lot about CFNY, of course, because the doc is out, and also another reminder to check out episode number 9 where we talk all doc. So it was January 1976 that CFNY applied for a power increase, and just to recap those that don't know, that CFNY was a Brampton radio station licensed for Brampton, so the CRTC controls that stuff and say, okay, Brampton, you can have this tower and so high and this much power because you're Brampton. You just serve Brampton. Mm-hmm. And the documentary explains it well how we eventually got onto the CN tower, but it took three efforts. So this story goes back to well before the CN tower. So I guess there's 3 times that CFNY had a power increase. There's the ultimate CN tower. There's nothing better than the CN tower, the height and the power. Before that, there was a power increase in 1977.
Correct.
To 100,000 watts. Okay. So this is before that. This is January 1976. The station was broadcasting at 857 watts, not 8,057, not 800,000. It was 857 watts. And this is another story where they applied for an increase and they didn't get it. And I don't know if you remember at the time how many times that you applied, Ivor, but it wasn't until July 1977 that you got that 100,000 watts, and where really the station started, and that's where you could hear it.
I mean, I think you would maybe look at there's a time frame or something after that application. It said maybe it took 3 months to get approved or 6 months to get approved after the application. And
maybe that's it.
And then what's the process to put all the equipment together to get it out? But if you did see the documentary, it is mentioned by the former GM that there was a couple of AM towers that were in the area, and that they ended up using them illegally to project more power for the radio station. And Ted Wallish, and is quoted in the movie, is saying you could only get it for a few blocks. Well, I lived in Brampton, and I did not live a few blocks away from the station. I lived in Bramalea, so I was probably, that's probably about, I don't know, 6 to 8 miles away, maybe 10 at the most. but we could get it in Brampton. And I recall as far back as 1974, and it was CHIC FM, and we used to listen to it. And then I moved to England between 75 and 76, summer of 75 to summer of 76. As soon as I got back, I had one of my buddies say, he goes, "Hey man, they changed to CFNY FM." But that's what we listen to now. I do remember one of the very first ads for the radio station said, "CFNY FM, now 100,000 watts. Eat your heart out, Chum FM." And it's like, well, you still couldn't get it downtown. And of course, there's all the examples of the people that couldn't get the radio station. I do want to just take a second here. We talked about maybe having some listener stuff on the movie. But gentlemen, so I want to read this now because it relates to CFNY and the power. So, gentleman named Bruce Hall, he says, "Longtime CFNY fan. I live in Brantford. I collected the tees, the sweatshirts, stickers, and sound checks. CKDK 102.3 in Woodstock came on the air to mess up a clear signal of 102.1, and I was outraged. I sent a letter to the CRTC, wrote Gary Dunford at page 6 of the Toronto Sun, and he included my rant in his column. But I ended up erecting a 50-foot tower, 2 stacked FM antennas, and a Magnum Dynalab FM amplifier, whatever that is. Problem solved, and the spirit of radio was booming in daily. I love the doc." So thanks to Bruce Hall on that. How you improvised, because many people did improvise to get it. You even gave a tip in the movie yourself, Scott. So.
Yes, that's so true. Actually, I pulled up some of the comments that I pulled from social media the last few days. So I thought let's just dig into that right now. Let's do that now. So these are some comments, questions from people that watch the doc CFNY, The Spirit of Radio, which if you haven't seen is you can stream it on YouTube. Just look for TVO, the TVO YouTube channel, and it's there. It's called CFNY : The Spirit of Radio. Rob Pruce made a comment. I thought this was nice. I thought I'd read it out. Rob Pruce of The Spoons said, "My favorite quote in the new CFNY doc is the last word from David Marsden, quote, 'It was just a moment in time.'" And he says, "It was a moment that was supposed to happen, so we made it happen." He loved that. He says, "My second favorite part of the CFNY doc is the clips from the later 80s listeners calling in to complain that they were now playing George Michael. What's next, Madonna and Michael Jackson?" And then it's Ivor and I going, probably.
It's you and I. It was you. You had the foresight back then to run tape in the control room of people calling in and complaining, and that made it into the doc. Man, forever. And I think who would have known that taping that would have made it into a documentary all these years later, but it did.
Yeah. So a further note to that, because I think someone posted somewhere that, they had this clip of people calling in and complaining about George Michael being played on the station, and they said it sounded fake. It sounded like they kind of made that up, and it's like, no, just what Ivor said. We actually, had a recorder in the studio. We took a bunch of calls, and that's exactly what's used in the film. Now the audio was terrible, so that's why there were the text was on the screen. So.
Like if you didn't know you and I right now from listening, you wouldn't know that it's us unless us telling you. And that's the truth.
Yes. So just a further note to that is, Ivor, I still have that tape, that cassette with more calls. So I just need to find another source. And I know the people that did the film, the doc, that Max Schichter, the director, and his people that he had gathered, the people that he had surrounded himself with were some.
Is he got
no, they did something. They found someone to just boost that audio and clean up the audio to make it a little bit better. So I want to play some more of that. So I have more of those calls. So we will feature those in an upcoming Music Milestones YYZ. So there's more. Yes.
I did not bring it with me, but I did hear that Jim Fonger was feeling a little uneasy. He didn't come to the premiere last minute, but apparently he didn't expect what was portrayed in the movie. Oops. But
well,
you reap what you sow.
I did. I think he was, there was some correspondence between myself and Jim.
Yeah,
And
you
I,
and Jim-
you know,
you and Jim
I told
talked.
him, I said, yeah. And I did say, just so you know, you take a bit of heat here for this,
You
this
think?
experiment with top
A lot of
40.
heat.
So he's aware of it.
Yeah, no, I know he would.
Yes, I guess a lot of heat.
You know, I actually was going to thank him at the event for giving us a good villain story, right? So why not?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
What are you going to do now?
Definitely.
I've got something here. Another one to
You
read.
go ahead. Yep.
Mine. It says, this is from Michelle Pinto Armstrong. I just watched the documentary, wanted to send a message to say thank you. It was so great to relive those years. My CFNY years were from the mid-'80s onwards, and I know it formed who I am today. If only my younger self could have understood the impact it would have on me and my worldview. Again, thank you to you and Dave for all of those involved.
That's great. I've got one here. Sean Uprichard, who just said, awesome, ! Watched it last night, loved it. I'm hoping there's a possibility of diving deeper into the story, maybe multi-episode series focusing on different eras and personalities. And we do talk a little bit on episode 9 about that. So I'll just leave it at that. Do you have another one, Ivor? I got a few more here.
One more here. This is from a gentleman's name is Anthony Corandia. He goes, I can't tell you how valuable and influential CFNY and the DJs were to me in the 80s. So much so that when it was threatened to be taken off the air, that is in the receivership times, this would have been 1979, 80. I went and signed every petition I could find around town. Earl Jive and Headley were my favorites, but I loved all the DJs. And FYI, I won 2 tickets from Live Earl Jive for the police picnic. And I still have the poster in mint condition. Thanks, David Marsden and everybody else.
That's great. Lisa Nicholson said, so lucky to have won tickets to the pre-screening. This was at the Chorus Edge Studios. It was a very special evening indeed, she says, meeting so many CFNY radio personalities. Then the documentary, amazing footage, great interviews, wonderful night. The only downside, there was no heat in the building.
I mean, God damn it. It was like, I guess because you're away for the Christmas holidays, the building, like most companies, you shut down, for a week between, Christmas and New Year's, and maybe and the week after, as Chorus did. And it was their first day back, and half the building wasn't back. And I walked in there and I was like, okay, it's about 10 degrees in here. And is it going to get warmer? And as a consequence, there was no need for a coat check that night. Everybody was in there with their coats on who didn't take them off. So
I know
that was unfortunate. Hopefully the heat is back on at Chorus.
Yep. This from Pauline Reed, who was the wife of the late JR.
Jim Reed. Yep.
And Jim Reed was the midday host on CFNY for so many years. She wrote, the preview was great. While I know the answer, I'd wished I'd asked David Marsden to talk about him and Jim, who were pictured in this promo, taking Japan to a grocery store in Brampton. Now, Ivor and I know that story, and if you haven't heard it, so we're going to bring David Marsden on this podcast and get him to retell that story, because it's great, about when he took the band Japan, who showed up at the station across the road to the Loblaws, and all the fun that ensued with that.
I experienced that firsthand that in that particular day. And, it happened with a few bands, right? They come to Brampton, and, Brampton wasn't exactly Queen Street in 1979, 1980. So it was, it was kind of hoser territory, I got to tell you.
Yeah. This one from Catherine Evans Peterson. She said, I grew up with CFNY, still remember the original house, hung out at Kennedy Road Station when Claire Stanfield, Simon Le Bon's fiance, was there, and waved to her. A friend from high school worked there as the gopher. Humble Howard stayed at the Holiday Inn in Brampton when I worked there. Still remember seeing him walk in the first time. Lost count of how many CFNY dance parties I attended. The 80s were a great decade. It's interesting, and Duran Duran were at the station a lot, and good friends with Earl and Bev, and they and many visited the station. So lots of stories.
Yeah, no, there was so many instances of. I mean, I could go on all day. The amount of people that visited the radio stations, and there was some great memories. And to your point, Earl was, yes, they were, him and Bev were were friends with those bands. I mean, I ended up becoming very, very good friends with Ian Astbury, and I was even invited to his wedding, but the wedding didn't happen, so I never ended up going. So, but yeah,
Wow.
he was an example of one that I became quite close with it, as well as all of the local bands. And for me, still to this day, I'm on the Teenage Head guest list for life. So they actually sent by both a note from Steve Mahone and from Gene Champagne that they really, and Dave Rave. So 3 members of Teenage Head all sending their compliments on the doc as well.
That's great. Comment here from, I love this idea. Eric H. Claver says, I'd love to see the full interviews released separately. Maybe someday.
Well, I think that's all, a matter of rights or whatever, and wading through them. I mean, I think there's something, I don't know. I heard something between, 70 to 90 hours worth of interviews that are sitting there. So it would be a pretty monumental task to go all through all of those things. It's it's kind of like when my days at the label, and a band like the Tragically Hip was like they're putting out a super deluxe edition of a record, and you got to wade through just like hours and hours and hours of all these tapes to figure out what's going to be used and what's best. So and sometimes just a warts and all interview is not the best experience, and that sometimes you just kind of have to edit yourself.
Let me just, a couple more here. There's so many more. Maybe next week we'll do some more, but here's just a couple more. I love this comment from Oliver Schmid says, what a surprise that we, the extended mixed generation, want more. We did get a lot of comments. A lot of comments about wanting more. And here's one that kind of touches on just so many things that we couldn't do because it's a short documentary and you'd need to do like 5 different documentaries. But this guy, Patty Land, I guess a female, Patty Land, says some comments from listeners and more music clips would have been great. There was no mention of the station's impact on the industrial scene. Nitzareb from 242, my boyfriend, who has never understood the spot that CFNY holds in my heart, was clearly left wondering what was so great about it. It sort of missed the meat and potatoes of the station. It was good nonetheless. And I think everybody that's a good example of everybody has a certain type of music that they loved and it was a big part of their life. So, and we did talk about that too, about in making the doc, we thought, good, there's the punk and post-punk, and then there's the kind of Smith's jangle guitar, REM stuff, and then there was the ska, and all these different genres that happened, especially in the 80s, late 70s and 80s. And we thought we gotta go into each one of those and talk about those, and we realized, oh my God, there's no time for that.
You never have time to do it. I mean, you could sit down and talk, but I mean, I got to a point where we kind of made fun of some of the younger people at the radio station, and there was the road show or whatever, and we had these two. There was the Mike Stafford and Kevin O'Leary made some fake road because Martin Streak used to do, let's do the road show reports, the video road show report, what's going on, and then Mike Stafford and Kevin O'Leary heard it, and they made fake road show reports, right? So it was the video dance report brought to you by, and they pretended they were 2 girls named Beth and Jackie, and so they would just like, and at the end of every report it's like, and everybody danced and had fun. And so, so they would make fun of the sort of the synth bands. And of course, I always remember that Dead Milkman track that came out, You'll Dance to Anything. Do you remember that one, Scott? We should play it on the program.
Oh, yeah.
You'll Dance to Anything.
That's great. I love it. Yes.
Public Image Limited, You'll Dance to Anything by The Cure. And why don't you like a great American band like us or whatever, right? So, yeah, we should play that for everybody. So
remind
anyway,
me, I was going to say next week.
Yeah, we'll get to it. I had one. This speaks to the promos, right? Because we haven't really talked about the promos, and this was from Brad Weir, and Brad was at the time, he was the head of promotion at Sony Music, which back then was CBS Records. He goes, we did some wild on-air promos with the station, in particular with the Stiff Records label. Reckless Eric, the big smash comes to mind. The finalists had to smash up an old upright piano to pieces with a sledgehammer. The first one to do it won the grand prize of a trip to the Indy 500 with seats on the track where the most crashes happened. The station produced on-air spots. It was genius. And I remember that, and it was like, wow, we're giving away a trip to sit on the most dangerous section of the Indy 500, and it was done at Zounds out on Eglinton and Scarborough, and there was like 2 pianos, and these guys were given sledgehammers. Again, this is something that would be your HR nightmare today, the people hurt themselves
would
and
never happen.
Part of the piano would go flying into somebody's face or something like that. I mean, nobody got hurt, and giving away, actually doing a promotion on air, like you're giving away a trip to sit on the most dangerous part of the Indy 500s. Like, yeah, you were giving away a prize you could be killed on this promotion potentially. So anyway, that's some of the stuff that we got away with back then.
Okay. Just we'll do more of these comments next week, and we'll play that song next week. And I thought another thing we'll maybe cover next week, because we've run out of time, is it was the 35th anniversary of the closing of the Diamond. I think we got so many memories about the Diamond Club, which obviously became the Phoenix Club. But I think maybe we'll move that to next week. The one other thing, just connecting to the doc, the CFNY doc, is that some people did bring up about the other eras, and there should be, more, episodes sort of thing. And Martin Street came up sometimes, and we do have to remind people that although Marty is in this doc, he was not on the air in the Spirit of Radio era. He was working at, he was working at the roadshow, the Video Roadshow, and he didn't get his on-air break until the 90s. And the other thing I want to update everybody on is that there is a guy working on a documentary just about Martin Streak and the story of the station around Martin Streak. And his name is Will Dunlop, and I reached out to him to see where that doc is, and he said, and this is a quote from him, he says, to answer your question about the Martin doc, I did hit pause to do, as I hit pause because of some opportunities presented to me, included hired to write and direct a script, some health issues, and like Shep was offered a record label, which dropped in December. So he says, I'm going to finish the film, but it's coming together in the edit. So he's still working on that. So that is coming. And that's another reason we didn't go far into Martin Street, because there's this other doc.
We talked about this documentary being in what we've been doing, or what we did, was like 10 years in the making, probably, 7 of that trying to get financing to put it together. And when it finally happened, it took 3 years to do. So I know this one that Will's been working on, I probably talked to him 10 years ago about it. So, I mean, it's a stop, start, stop. and we were on a small crew and staff, but he's doing it on his own. So, perhaps more people helping
the whole
him.
other world.
So, before we do finish, there's 2 things I just want to, yes. We would be
remiss to say, go ahead, because we're going to wrap up.
Acknowledging the passing of Neil Peart 6 years ago. We will always remember him, of course, the fellow who, the late, great Neil Peart, who wrote The Spirit of Radio, who was given the title of our documentary, and one of the world's greatest bands of all time, who will be back out on the road in 2026. And just something for folks that want to watch David Bowie, there is a brand new BBC documentary that went up on YouTube yesterday. It is called The Final Act, and it is quite good. It's about an hour and a half. It starts with 1983 in the Let's Dance years. Then it goes into the whole disaster of Tin Machine, features a lot of people that Bowie worked with, certainly the Tin Machine band. Rick Wakeman is in it. Goldie is in it quite extensively. Tony Visconti, his longtime producer. Moby is in it. It's really, really good. And if you're a Bowie fan, it's worth absolutely checking out. So do check that one, and you will enjoy. Thanks.
Awesome. Where is it available? Sorry.
It is up on YouTube currently. So
okay.
BBC4 documentary on YouTube right now. David Bowie, The Final Cut.
Beautiful. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Just a reminder again, more on the CFNY doc on episode number 9. And we will continue to talk about the doc and read some of the comments and have some guests to talk further about stories and all the different things about the station that affected your life. So please send us some more comments, and we'd be happy to answer your questions or just love to hear your stories, your CFNY stories. So you can see us on our socials, Music Milestones YYZ, and also our website, right? musicmilestonesyyz.com, where you can leave a comment there too. Thank you. Ciao from Ivor and Scott.